And hello and welcome, everybody. Happy Friday the 13th. It's great to have you with us. For any of you who haven't attended our Crowdcast before, my name is Maria Marquis, and here at Coda, I focus on customer education. So how can we really help people get those good ideas and figure out how to bring Coda into their day-to-day work, their day-to-day life to just solve those problems that they might be trying to tackle? Now, I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Thomas, and he and I are going to be working together to answer all of your questions and share one of the Coda docs that we use here all the time to manage our work with our engineering team. Thomas, want to just introduce yourself to the group today in case they haven't met you in our support channels?
Yeah, my name is Thomas, and I started here at Coda about 6 months ago, and I work on our product support team, which means I get to help all of our customers build really cool Coda docs. And I am joined today by several cats who may or may not make appearances as we go through this.
Yes, Thomas and I were joking as we were getting ready to go live. Both of our sets of cats were like, meow, meow, meow. So you might get the wonderful benefit of seeing a cat jump into the screen. That is one of the side effects of working from home, is inevitably you're gonna have a pet show up at some point in time. So my cat is Athena. She's right here next to me right now. And Thomas has three. You have three cats, right, Thomas?
I have three cats, so many.
So one of them might show up as well. But our primary job today is to show our dev escalation doc, which is something that Thomas built to help work with the engineering team. Now, before we jump in and show you how that works, I just want to make sure everyone is aware of how to get in touch with us as we move through today. Because even though we've got some things we want to share with you, ultimately, we're here to answer your questions. So you can use the chat field over there on the right side of your screen. And it looks like a couple people have already started posting there, which is awesome. So that's something you can use at any point in time today. But if you have a question, we would just ask that you click on the Ask a Question button right below our beautiful faces, because that way we won't lose it. We don't want to lose your questions amid the chat field over there on the side. So feel free at any point in time, just add your question there. We'll be keeping an eye on that today. And if you're not quite sure, like, oh, I don't know if I have a question, but I'm curious what other people are asking, no worries. You can click on that yourself and upvote questions that you might also have. So it's a great way for Thomas and I to know kind of what's most important to all of you today. So Thomas, before I share my screen, I would just love to know a little bit of the origin story of this doc. So where did you get the idea to build this doc, and kind of where'd that come from, the problem you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so we have a really amazing support team here at Coda, but there are some questions that we can't answer, and we need to get help from our engineering team, whether that's to look at code or to kind of get into some tricky logs. We would often have to communicate with them. And because Coda is a distributed team, it means I can't just go tap on someone's shoulder and say, hey, please take a look at this. So we had mostly been using Slack to communicate those questions and get those answers. And Slack is great for a lot of things, but it's not great for kind of like a long-term commitment that investigating a ticket is. So I was tasked with finding a way to build out a process where we could escalate these tickets to our engineers, have a better understanding of what's happening through data, and then be able to see them through a little bit more easily.
Yeah, because I like what you're saying is that, you can be going over to someone and tapping them, but interrupting someone when they're trying to solve a problem is also not helpful. And then because you're in Portland, we've got folks in New York, folks in Austin, folks in Florida, folks in Seattle, folks in San Francisco, in Mountain View, that we don't have that luxury of like just running into someone and being like, hey, what do you have? And then getting those interruptions can actually sometimes slow down the solving of a problem, particularly in that distributed team situation. So as far as like who uses this doc, could you kind of give us the cast of characters of like the different pieces and how they interact with it? And then we'll take a look.
Yeah. So obviously the support team itself uses it. What we do is we get customer inquiries through our support tool. And when we find one that we can't handle, that's when we kind of engage this process. On the other end, we have a team of engineers who work a rotating on-call schedule. So every day, a different engineer is involved in that process, and that's who we hand those tickets off to.
Awesome. Cool. Well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can actually take a look at this doc, open it up, see what its guts look like, and start to see how it's built so that folks can start to get some ideas. And also, everybody, remember, today is about you. There's no such thing as an interruption in our virtual crowdcast today. So at any time, got a question, just let us know. Thomas and I will be happy to answer it. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And Thomas, if you could just let me know when you can see it, just so I know that we're all good.
I'm in.
All right, fantastic. So here we are. This is actually a copy of Thomas's doc, but it is sort of a snapshot of where this was about yesterday. So Thomas, do you want to share why you have this "What is this about" section? I always love to see this in any doc. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important that our folks know what a doc is for, how it works, who's involved. Otherwise, especially within Coda, we have so many docs. An individual can't always know all of them. So I think, and most of the team thinks, it's a good for best practice to introduce your doc so folks understand its purpose, the people involved, and how to use it going forward.
Yeah, because if you think about it, everybody who is with Coda right now, they all know what this doc is for. But what if we hire somebody new and they come in and they're just seeing this doc and they don't have any context with it. So I love to see this in any doc that's going to be with you for an extended period of time, or where you know that the team is going to flex and change, because you want to make sure that you take all that stuff that's in your brain that you think is obvious and make it really clear to everybody else who's joining you. So really good best practice in this case. So Thomas, let's actually start with the champion side of the doc. So the folks who are on our customer support team are fantastic customer champions like Thomas. Let's kind of walk through that day in the life. So Thomas, you just let me know where you'd like to go. Here we are in the support escalation checklist. Does seem like a good place to begin?
Yeah. So here's just a quick guide. I'm really a fan of having TLDRs wherever possible. We're moving fast. We have a lot going on. Sometimes you just want to know the immediate needs of information. So this just walks us through what has to be done. Identifying a ticket, tagging it in our customer management system. And then a big and important point is explaining the problem to our engineering team, making sure they know what's going on and not having them rerun all of the tests that we've done.
Yeah, right on.
And then, of course, beneath it is this checklist that just gives you a little bit more detail on some of the stuff that is above it. Again, it's always good to have that information available. I love that we can fold it away so that folks can kind of only access the information that is most useful to them.
Totally.
And allows folks to just quickly get up to speed. And like you said before, we're always hiring new people, and those new people should have an easy way to learn about our processes and then take part in them.
Yeah, and folding, this is actually a relatively new feature. Thomas, I think this just got released last week, right?
Yes, folding is a new feature, and it is one of my favorites. We were lucky to have it in our internal build for a little bit longer than customers, so I'm used to it, but it is an incredibly useful tool for information management. Yeah,
so particularly if you're doing like text work, right? If you're doing that big write-up, you don't want to just overwhelm people with all these words. It's a great way to kind of reveal and present information as you go forward. And if anyone hasn't played with this yet, how you would do it is if you have any of our heading styles, so the H1, H2, or H3, you would see this little shish kebab menu show up next to them on the left, and then you could click on that and choose collapse content, and that would turn on folding for that section, because we wanted to make sure that we gave you the option, because not everybody likes folding, and this allows you to decide when and how to deploy that. Cool. So Thomas, let's go to the open issues. Now, in this case, it's filtered by the user, so I don't have any. But do you want to talk through what's happening here and kind of how you as a champion would use this particular area?
Absolutely. So first off, we wanted to divide this document into different sections. So the two big ones we're going to see are obviously the champions and the devs, because how a customer champion is going to use this document is different than how a developer is.
Right.
So that was just an information management decision we made early on. And here is kind of where customer champions live. They're open issues. So there is, of course, a button to add an issue, but we also have some automations on the back end. So when you're working in the queue, our tool is Intercom, you can identify a ticket there and apply a tag to it. And that uses our Zapier integration and automatically pulls that ticket here for review. And they'll see that ticket right here. They can add any sort of additional information, but it draws in much of that information directly from Intercom, so you don't have to write a new note. You don't have to find the link for the developer. All of that stuff is right there. And then there is a final check here, so that because our escalation process does alert our engineers with an on and on-call rotation, we wanted to have one more check so that automation didn't, needlessly wake up an engineer or something like that. So there is also a final escalate button here. Once the customer champion has reviewed, oh no, well, there you go.
There you go.
Once a customer champion has reviewed this, they can hit escalate, and that goes ahead and sends it over to our engineers. That also uses Zapier. It uses a tool called Ops Genie, which handles our rotation schedule for our engineers. So this is the screen we customer champions just spend a lot of time on. And getting it so that it was easy and fast was a really big part of this. So using buttons, using our integrations and packs to pull in information very quickly was really critical for us here.
Yeah, one thing I like about what you just said is that it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you can, as you're working in Intercom answering those questions, you can be flagging things with that tag and know that they just will come here as you're moving through. So you don't have to do that context switch of like, oh, now I have to go to the dock and I have to add that thing manually. It can kind of happen just in that way using the Zapier connection, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. We wanted people to be able to continue their normal workflows without always having to context shift.
And also, when I clicked on this, the reason why it got filtered out is because this table here is filtered by the user. So since it wasn't assigned to me, it actually got filtered out. So this also allows every customer champion to be able to just see what's most important to them, right? So that Thomas doesn't have to worry about like, oh, now I'm seeing all of Charlotte's stuff and all of Hannah's stuff. Like, where's my thing that I was working on? It allows it to be customized automatically. So anybody who's dealing with tasks or like a team that's trying to manage all these different elements, having a filtered view by user is really great way to just make kind of a my area that happens automatically. So you don't have to have a bunch of different spots. Cool. So Thomas, want to chat about this returned area, what we would see here?
So this is an important process, and it's one sometimes support teams don't like to talk about, which is that sometimes you're wrong when you escalate a ticket. So in this case, it's important to know what types of tickets don't need to be escalated, that they could have resolved themselves. So this section here is any ticket that you've escalated to an engineer that the engineer has then looked at and returned or de-escalated in some sense to say, hey, look, this is how you would solve this. This is why you can do it. And then we can use that as a learning opportunity for our customer champions. It's an important part of growing up a team and learning, especially with so many new features as Coda keeps growing, to just identify where we could have upskilled ourselves and handled an issue on the customer support team, which gives our customers a faster response. So we wanted to make sure to have a section where we could go back and review those sorts of tickets for that kind of learning.
I love that. And Thomas, I believe, is it in context where you define your terms in here?
Sorry, in what sense?
Oh, like priorities, like this is a P0 or a P1.
Yes, some of that's going to be in process.
Cool, let's take a look. Yeah. Again, folding, super cool.
I think that's, oh boy.
Under SLA, potentially?
Yes, SLA, good call. Excellent. Yeah. So this is another important part of the process is that we need to assign a priority as these issues come in. And those priorities have an SLA, how quickly we want to be able to turn around a ticket based on the priority. And that's a tricky area. You want to make sure you're getting the most important issues resolved as quickly as possible. Everyone's issues are obviously super important to us, but when a team can't get their work done or has a hard stop, that's something we just need to get fixed as quickly as possible. So we make sure that we have all of this information out here so that we as a team can make sure we're looking at things the right way. It's also important that we empower each customer champion to make this choice themselves. And there is, some wiggle room in that because no matter how much we write down, there's always going to be unique circumstances where customers maybe just need a little bit of extra help and they need it a little bit faster than, this guide might imply.
Yeah. And one thing I like about this, and this is another best practice I would introduce for any team, is to really define your terms, right? Because again, certain things that we build, it feels like, oh, this is obvious. Of course, this is what everybody else would think, but that might not necessarily be the case. So by defining your terms, by being really clear, it helps everybody get on the same page. And one other thing that I like about defining terms is that if we were to put this inside of a table, like P0, and then the definition is here, anytime we reference that P0, the definition would follow it too. So by being a little bit more detailed than you think you might normally be, oftentimes can really help these docs that are going to be with you for a long time have a lot more staying power and a lot more clarity. And also just a really good way for the team to learn, oh, I've been thinking about this as a P1, but turns out that that's actually more of a P2. So it helps the team kind of develop that shared vocabulary as well, which I really like. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Anything else on the customer champion side, Thomas, as far as what to expect, how that works, how you use it?
Yeah, so the customer champion side is pretty straightforward, and that was important because speed matters. We have customers waiting for us, and we want to be able to get back to them as quickly as possible. So that was one of the bigger priorities of designing that part of the process. It needed to be simple and needed to be fast, so that we could get back to doing what we do best, which is helping all of our customers. So that's mostly how that works. That covers the vast majority of it.
Right on. And also, just a reminder, everybody, if you've got questions, go ahead, let us know. We will be happy to assist. All right, so now let's put on our dev hats. So let's start here, I guess, with the on-call daily checklist. So this seems to be pretty similar to what we saw in that support escalation process, but on that dev side, right, Thomas? Is that kind of what we're seeing here?
Absolutely. This is another explainer so that we're switching audiences here. Now we've moved from our customer champion team to our devs, and they still deserve that same amount of information so that a new dev doing their first rotation can come in and understand the whole process and how they fit into it. Processes like this do have lots of information and tricks and things that you just need to know. And making that easy to pick up and learn was another important thing. And that's what this is. Just quickly walks our devs through what they need to do to help solve our customer problems.
Yeah, because again, what I was just thinking about as you were saying, what you were saying is that your on-call, it's not the same person every time, right? It's a rotating thing. So we want to make it as easy as possible for someone who's maybe been going about their day for 2 weeks and who's now coming to on-call to be like, oh, that's right. This is how it works. I can drop in and I can also be really fast in that response time. Cool. All right. So we've got then triage here. Thomas, you want to walk us through triage? And also, just so everybody knows, because I wanted to protect customer information, I just hid one of the columns, which is the summary from the intercom ticket, which outlines the issue, which you would also see here. But we wanted to just hide that so we can make sure that nobody's information got out here. Thomas, want to walk us through what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so this is kind of where our devs start. They start their day with these unclaimed tickets that need to be triaged. By triage, I mean, take a look at this ticket. Does it belong here? Does it need a response? Which tickets need a response first? That's where we come into the things like our priorities, whether or not something's an SLA, its status. And then they can do some of a large amount of that work that needs to be done to source these tickets and get them into the right place with buttons, because buttons are a fantastic tool.
I love buttons. There's so many here. It's so great.
There are, and they're colorful, and I wanted it to be really easy for our devs to come in, because that's really important. Our developers, when they are working this rotation, they're not building cool features to add to Coda, so we want to make sure that they can work this as quickly as possible.
Right.
So some of the obvious things are buttons to get us to the conversation that raised the ticket. Clicking that button takes you right to our intercom conversation where we've escalated this ticket, and that's where dev could get more information or details or even communicate with our customers, because our developers do get out in the front lines and work directly with our customers to resolve those kinds of problems. The detail view just pops open that row, so you can see just in a different manner all of the information that's contained within it.
Right.
That's especially important for the summaries, which are often a bit lengthy, although, as Maria said, they are hidden from this view. And then finally, you have these two really important buttons, claim and return. Return is that process that we talked about a little bit earlier, where you send it back to the customer champion. And that kicks off several workflows that alerts the customer champion, lets them know that their ticket's been returned, and allows them to act upon that information. And claiming it gets that ticket assigned to you. It marks the status as in progress, and it allows the engineer to start working on a resolution for that customer. And then the idea is that they kind of work this top to bottom. They find the highest priority issues, those whose SLA needs to be met, and they work through those. And then they can do that all very quickly from this view. So that's the other thing. Like I've added a lot of sections where it's the same information, just presented in different working types. What you're doing in triage is different than how you would approach a ticket that's in your queue that you just want to work on. So this is a place where we can come quickly and we can present that information in a very quick and actionable manner.
Totally. And one thing I really like about this and the use of buttons, like why I think buttons are so powerful, besides the fact that they're colorful and fun, is that if I were an engineer and I'm on my commute into the office, let's say I'm taking the train in, I could pull this up on my phone and I could be reviewing everything. And then these buttons become a swipe action. So I could swipe to the left and be like, claim, return. Oh, I want to look at the intercom ticket. Oh yeah, I'm going to claim this. So I can, like, before I'm in the office, go through everything, triage everything, move very quickly, so that then when I get to the office and I'm at my computer, I can actually then just like dive in right away. So it allows for like that kind of flexibility of working style as well, which I think is really cool. The other thing that I think is really worth noting here is you see these little yellow triangles, everybody. This means that there's like conversations that are happening on these different rows as well. So if I were to open up this particular one, it's going to expand that row into that detail view. And I could go ahead and then have like a whole comment thread happening here as well. So that, you know, Betty, who this is assigned to, she and I could be chatting about this ticket here too. So I could be making some conversations there as well. Awesome. Cool, Thomas. Anything else on the triage view that you think would be valuable for folks to know, or things that we missed?
I don't think so. I think that covers this one.
Bam. Well, let's head on over to our queue then. In this case, I have not claimed any tickets, but Thomas, do you want to chat about what would happen here for a dev?
Yeah, again, we've got these kind of guides at the top that just sets expectations. In this case, we consider the person who takes that ticket the sole point of contact. So that means if they end up needing help from someone else, or if they have to step away from a minute, they know that this is still their responsibility until they hand off that ticket to someone else. If, for example, it takes more than a full day. It reminds them that it's important to mark the ticket with the appropriate issue type. So in this case, that's really helpful for us as a team to know where our customers are having problems so that we can better focus our resources on prevention, which is one of the bigger goals of a process like this. On one hand, it's really important to solve people's immediate problems, but it's better to know the types of problems people are having and solve them before they have those problems. So that allows us to collect a lot of really valuable data, and having it set by the engineer means that it's really clear. I might escalate a ticket thinking it's, a bug, and, an engineer might find out, no, that's not a bug. And it's important that we have the right distinction between those. And that allows us to do that really quickly. So there would be—
I love that feedback loop. No, I was just saying, I love that feedback loop of like, hey, we're putting our best guess of what we think is happening here, and then getting that, oh, this is actually what's happening, and having that ability to learn. And it's not just a reactive doc. It kind of helps you and the team be proactive in the future, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. That learning and growing is just as important as solving those issues up front. So being able to access the tickets that you've worked on in the past from the customer champion aspect, seeing those return tickets, that's all really helpful stuff. And we use that as a team to grow. So in this page, though, our engineers come in and they'll have that list of tickets there for them, and they can deep dive into that and just start resolving those issues. So this is a page where there's more about just presenting information about your current work and allowing you to solve that stuff and kind of get out of the way. So this one was nice and easy to build because it's clear what our engineers want. And part of this process that I didn't really touch upon is working very closely with our engineers, a lot of building and then testing. And in fact, we're in another loop with our engineering team now, where we're all going to come together on Monday, run through this doc again and see what we can do to improve it. And that's one of the things that I really love about building a process in Coda, is if you build a good schema, if your databases are good in the beginning, you can do anything with it later on when you determine that, hey, maybe having triage in your queue separately doesn't make sense. We could reconfigure all of this to kind of changing demands as the company grows. And that's really a fantastic thing for me. I feel like I can go in and build something and not worry if it's not the perfect solution, because we can go back in this cycle and rebuild things. And of course, I don't need anyone to write any code for me. So even me as a customer champion can build out these apps that are essentially, escalation and incident management systems, and they can be built exactly how we want to use them.
Yes. Yeah. And one thing I will just sort of double click on or neon sign emphasize of what Thomas said is like really, as long as you've got your data, you can then flip it and adjust it however you want. So I think the most important step in any Coda doc is just gathering your stuff, right? Like, how do we put all this stuff into one big giant table that we can then decide to manipulate and adjust and work with it as we see fit over time? So really just like getting your stuff is a great way to begin. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's take a look at the all open tickets then. Oh, and my cat just made a little appearance over here on the left. She's very excited about this escalation process.
So this here is all of the open tickets. The idea is that we want folks to be able to have a high level view, our engineers, of the whole scope of things.
Right.
Processes are really important, but things do fall through the cracks. So having a view where we can say, okay, this is just all of the work that needs to be done, no matter what. And having that as an opportunity to view that stuff is easy to build, even if we don't think we're going to need to use it a lot. And I think that also speaks to that data arrangement. There's lots of views that are very easy and quick to build that I may not have thought to build, and this was actually in response to an engineering request. They're like, "Hey, I want to be able to see everything. I don't just need my stuff." I was like, "Great, data's there, easy peasy."
Yeah.
So that's what this is. So this is all of our open tickets, regardless of who they're assigned to, just whether or not they're open.
Yeah, awesome. So Thomas, that actually brings up an interesting question I'd love to know is, as far as the anatomy of this doc, how many tables, like core tables, are you working with?
That's a great question. It's actually surprisingly few.
Cool.
There's the tickets themselves, is the main table that we all work through.
Yep.
There's one table that captures or is used to send data to Zapier. And then there's just tables that define our priority, as well as some things like issues and other stuff that we use as a vocabulary elsewhere in Coda. So those all just enhance this main ticket table. But surprisingly, you can build something this big and with so many moving parts with actually one major table that handles most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, because it looks like, if I'm looking at this here, this priority, this is what I was talking about, like having the definition of P1, we need to resolve this in 1 business hour. That's our SLA. So this is pulling from a table, and it looks like status is also pulling from a table as well. Then we get that nice little chip color, which is really cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the chip coloring was a new feature, and it's helpful to quickly get that kind of like visual indication of what's important.
And I find that color coding for me and like my style is always a really critical part, because I want to be able to just like look at something and just get a quick hit of like, what in general am I seeing here? Are we in good shape? Are we in okay shape? Or do we really need to like work on something? Because, oh my gosh, everything's on fire, So those different color coding with the conditional formatting and pulling that from those tables is super powerful for me and my working style in particular.
Absolutely. People love colors.
I know, right? It's just the same thing with buttons, right? It's like, oh, I want everything to just kind of have a little bit of fun and flavor to it, if you will. So then, Thomas, do you want to chat about the difference between all open tickets and open unassigned tickets?
Sure. This is there are some other filters at the higher level that make some of those views miss some potential circumstances. And this is another view that we built in response to what we were hearing from developers. This is just the tickets that are unassigned. Being able to quickly build views also sometimes means you end up with some very similar views. And that's actually something that we're going to be talking about in future iterations. Which of these views are most important? Where do we want to highlight information? Because when you can build things so easily, it's nice to have a lot of this stuff. But then at a certain point, sometimes folks will come in and they're just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Which views matter? Which ones are showing me the things that I need? So this is one of those views where it's like, do we need this? It serves a purpose, of course, but does that purpose matter more than what we're losing in kind of like information simplicity?
Yeah. And I think this is a really good point for everyone to kind of take away from this, which is, if you've got that core data, you can create as many views of it as you like, but always asking yourself, how are we actually using this? How does this actually fit into our day-to-day? Is this the most efficient way? is this something that we really use, or is it just kind of an idea that we thought would be interesting? Always coming back to like, what does your reality look like, and building for that reality. I think that's always something anytime I'm coaching people on Coda usage, that's the key, is like, yes, there's lots of bells and whistles, but are you using them? Or do you really just need like one view with all of the open tickets, right? Yeah, cool. Speaking of tickets, Thomas, do you want to walk us through kind of this ticket section, the purpose of this, where that fits?
Yeah, so some of this is for me in many ways. I want to be able to, as someone who's tasked with keeping an eye on the overarching escalation process, I wanted a way to just see very quickly all the open tickets, which is just, hey, what's the state of the queue, or something like all the closed tickets. How are we looking historically?
Totally.
And then things like stale tickets, like these are tickets that are outside of their SLA. So why, what's going on here, and why might that be? And then things like or stale tickets and out of SLA are very similar. But again, that comes down to what do we want out of our views, and which of these is most important. And another part of the process that does make escalations a little tricky is that we do sometimes have to ask more questions from our customers. And that makes a process where one person is owning something a little bit tricky because it means a customer might not be able to get back to us immediately. So being able to say, okay, these are the tickets that are awaiting a customer, I can quickly go in and say, oh, did the customer reply? Maybe I can bring that information in and keep this process rolling. And I do think that's one of the advantages of having someone in charge of not necessarily just building the process, but keeping an eye on it and making sure things are working. But much like the engineers, I wanted to see what views are important to me. What things am I looking at the most? And constantly keeping a critical eye on that so that I could retire or augment some of these views, which is such a fantastic ability for me to just quickly say, nope, not this one. Yes, this one. And still be able to get these really high level views. And that's kind of what this area is, more of a data management, understanding our current status.
Yeah, I like that this is kind of like your Batman view of like in your fortress, like, oh, here's all the things that I'm seeing that are going on, and I can respond as I need to. It's like your special fortress.
Yeah, absolutely. And that stuff matters, especially when you're working with so many customers.
Sweet. So let's move on to this context section. We've already taken a look at process, SLA, and what is this all about, which is, as you said, more of a documentation. Hey, let's just make sure everyone understands what this is. But let's chat about the escalation reports and where this fits into your workflow.
Yeah, so it's just as I mentioned earlier, it's important that we learn from what's happening in this escalation process. And here's some like the opportunity to do that, to quickly generate some reports on how tickets are moving through the process, what types of tickets are moving through the process, how quickly, by whom, and that sort of things. So we created this initial view where I can go in and quickly take screenshots or answer questions that I'm asked about this process, or better yet, folks who have questions about the process themselves can know that they can come to this section and find important reports. And then that is twinned together with the section beneath it called Last Week in Escalations, which is a weekly email every Monday morning. It shoots out these like small pieces of information that we as a team agreed upon are kind of our most interesting statistics, and sends them out as an email. That's using a Coda automation. I don't have to worry about it. These formulas update themselves, which I love. In previous roles, I used to spend a lot of time putting together like data reports, and then Coda does it all for me, and it even emails it. It's one of my favorite things.
It's like you have an intern, right? Like, yes. They're handling the data reporting and also the dissemination. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, because the only other thing we have is the data section, which is just like the core tables as far as how it's put together. But I'd love to, with our remaining time, chat a little bit about like the nuts and bolts of how this is all working together from a PAX and an automation standpoint. So let's first start off with the PAX side. And also, folks, if you've got questions, let us know either in chat or the Ask a Questions option. That's always open.
Yeah, so in terms of PAX, the biggest one we're using is, of course, Gmail. That powers our reporting and messaging. We did a little bit with Intercom just to be able to kind of augment conversation knowledge, because we can do that, and that's fantastic. And those are just the quick packs that let us like kind of sweeten up the Coda doc. That's how I see it, at least.
Like
make things a little bit easier. Yeah, they frost the doc.
Yes.
And they're so easy to set up and so quick that, you know, even if you don't need the full power of the pack, Gmail can do so much, but in this case, it's just sending an email for me. But that's the only piece I need, and that saves me so much time.
Yeah. And I will say this is the pack that I see most often in my work, and the one that I think is like the fastest way to get an awesome benefit, right? Which is, if I have a Gmail pack, I can email a section out to my team. So that section we saw with Thomas's team of like, here's the summary of all the things that are happening. We can just email that out to people. So we don't have to copy paste or, craft it ourselves. So just having that email go by either having a button you can push to like send out the notes, or what I personally love, and I think this is what you have set up, Thomas, is an automation, right? Like every Monday at 9 a.m., email this section to these people, which I think is just the most powerful way to just get an immediate like bit of rocket fuel into a doc, and also just saving yourself time, because nobody wants to have to like write stuff up, type it out, be the nag, right? It all happens automatically inside of Coda. Awesome. So then, Thomas, do you want to chat a little bit about the Zapier connection, kind of how that's thought through? Just maybe kind of outlining the steps for folks might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zapier is really fantastic for Coda because it fills in areas where we perhaps don't have a pack and allows docs to communicate with apps outside of that pack ecosystem. Or it allows us to kind of use data in ways that we couldn't in a pack. So in this case, it captures intercom conversations, but a very specific kind, and those tagged with our dev escalation process. And that's a big time saver. Instead of having us manually entering these tickets as we get them, we can quickly apply a tag and pull in all of this really excellent information right out of the gate. But we also use it to connect to the Ops Genie tool, which is how our engineers are doing things. And what I like about this is that meant that we didn't all have to agree on tools. Coda lets you bring data from wherever you need it to and get it all together. So when the engineering team decided they wanted to use Ops Genie, I said, no problem. We can pipe that data in from the Coda doc and not have to worry that we've all agreed upon tools that can talk to each other. So that actually just watches a table for new rows. And when a new row ends up on there, it sends the alert through. The engineers get the alert and they know they need to do work on that. And there are ways you could do that with other tools, but this is just, meeting folks where they already are, like taking advantage of systems that they've already used, which I think is a much easier process when you can use tools like Zapier and packs to bring all that data together.
And I think it also then allows you to, as you're figuring out, like, how does this process really play out? It lets you kind of be incremental, right? It's not like, okay, everybody, everything's totally different, right? You can build up that infrastructure that allows you as kind of the process manager to have your sanity and also like figure out, okay, this is working. We want to retain this part of our process, or, hey, we've figured things out. We've realized which tables are most important, how we want to see things. We can now retire this part of the process and sort of build this up here. So it's allowing people to get really comfortable with it, and also just like preserving speed, because, hey, everybody is busy, right? We are all like working on like less time than we actually would love to have. So allowing people to not have to give a lot of brain cycles to completely shift a process while you're starting to refine it kind of helps people get that advantage really quickly and like dip their toes in, which I think is also really helpful from that like change perspective, which is cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. How about the automations that are on this doc? We've got the automated report. Any other automations that you've built in this?
Oh boy, so many. Automations are really fantastic, and especially in processes that are time-based or very systematized. I think that's fantastic. So we have automations for all of our customer champions, so that a ticket they've escalated, anytime there's a change to that ticket, they get a notification. And that's just a simple automation we've set up. So knowing that the ticket I've escalated is been assigned to an engineer, it's been resolved, or that they're waiting for a customer's reply is really useful and actionable information to me. And you don't need to worry as much because of that. You can know things are being taken care of and people feel looped in and involved. And similarly on the engineering side, they often get caught up on things, or perhaps they just work too much on one ticket. So we send them little nudges if their ticket's nearing its SLA or it hasn't been touched in enough time. Those sorts of things can just quickly be set up. Nobody has to feel bad about them. In this case, we're using the Slack pack, so they get little messages in Slack. One of the things that I try to do is make my messages seem really friendly and helpful so that folks don't feel like they're being nagged or aren't doing something they should be, and just keeps the whole process running. And that saves me a lot of time, and it makes sure that folks feel really good about what they're doing and how the whole process is working, in my opinion.
One thing I think is really critical about what you just said is that it allows the system to be the person who's holding everybody accountable, right? It doesn't have to just be Thomas being like, hey, could you please do this thing? Or like, it's out of SLA. I need you to do something, right? It allows, everyone agrees that this is the process we're going to follow. This is the SLAs that we have. This is the process. This is how it works. And then the system enforces it. So it's not like on one person. It's like the team is together with that, which I think is really nice. As someone who's had to be like the taskmaster before, it's nice that you can be like, okay, Coda's got it, which is really valuable. Awesome.
I think so.
Excellent. So the last things I'd love to chat about, unless there's other ideas that you have, Thomas, that you think would be really valuable. I always love to ask people, because I think building a doc is one of the best ways to learn. So I'd love to know, like, what was the biggest learning you had in building this particular doc out for your team?
Yeah, I touched upon this a little bit before, but I think one of the biggest learnings for me is you can build everything. You really can, and it's not hard, but sometimes choosing what not to build is just as important as choosing what to build.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah, you really have to find that balance, especially when you're bringing lots of people into a process. Sometimes simplicity is the way to go. Also, colors. Always throw down some colors.
Always colors, yes. Buttons, colors, conditional formatting. And I would say, as all of you are trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to build this process, what should I build? Like, we are here for you. Like, please get in touch with us around, like, if you want to brainstorm something, if you're unsure if you've set it up right, or if you're trying to figure out, what do I not need? Like, the Coda community is there for you, and so are we on the support channel. So please get in touch with us. And then the only other thing I would love to know, Thomas, is if you think about folks who might be getting ready to build a similar process between their support team and their engineering and developer team, what advice would you give them, besides, of course, colors? Any other advice that you think is helpful as people figure out the process, things that you've learned from more of that people side of the house, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. First, getting agreement on what you want to know really is a big part of it. That way you kind of like have this end result that you can test against. Does this process allow us to know these things that we want to know? And in particular, with a process like dev escalation, it's important to agree that that learning cycle matters. And once we really bought into that idea and we got everyone on the same page, it really changed the way we went about doing that. So making sure that everyone agrees upon what the result of this process is critical, but also making sure your table schema makes sense is key. If you, like I mentioned, I've made tons of changes to this, but I haven't made very many changes to the overarching schema because we sat down as a team and we talked about, like, what are we going to need to know? And then you make columns for that and you think about how they talk through. So that it's like early work.
Yeah, it's like figure out what is the one unifying factor that we all care about. In this case, tickets, right? And then you can just expand on that with those columns, right? If you've got a row for a ticket, you can just be like, oh, we want to also have this information, add a column to it. Do. And then, does this column information have like other details about it? Here I'm thinking about like P0, we want the definition and the SLA associated with it. Great, let's actually make a little mini table we can look up into that column. So it just allows you to make those changes. And for those of you who are like, but what if I don't know ahead of time? If you realize, this column should also be like a subtable that we can pull in with a lookup, there's a way to you click on the column and you can choose convert to table, and all of a sudden it makes one for you. So you don't have to worry about stripping it apart or making those changes. You can really flex and adjust as you move forward. Another recommendation I always have for people is if you're one of those people who likes to tinker before you kind of show it to people, you can always just make a copy of your doc and use that as like your editing area where you can figure things out. And then when you're perfectly happy with what you've made, you can then do some copy paste and bring it over on in. Awesome. Well, Thomas, that was all the questions that I had. Anything else that you think would be valuable for our group here? And of course, folks on the call with us, if you've got questions, feel free to pick my brain, pick Thomas's brain, pick our cat's brains, whatever you're interested in learning, we're here to help. But yeah, Thomas, any other sort of final thoughts or things that you think would be valuable for folks?
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. I had to ask for so much help while I was working on this. Just a second set of eyes or someone to bounce ideas off of is fantastic.
Yeah.
And we're happy to help you do that. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Cool. Awesome. Yes, Thomas is as you can tell, a very nice person, as are all of our customer support people. They're just an absolute delight and a fantastic team. Cool. Well, we'll hold for another minute or so if there's any other questions that you have. Yes, we'll do a little dance. We'll pet our cats. But if there's any other questions you have, please let us know. Otherwise, have a lovely weekend. Have a wonderful week ahead. And please keep us posted if there's anything that we can help with. Awesome. Looks like we have a question. Let's take a look. Great question, Andy. How can someone auto number the tickets? Thomas, you want to chat a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so Coda gives every row a unique identifier, and that's how we reference those tickets within the app itself. And one thing I didn't talk about is I actually use that ID in conjunction with Go links, which is a tool we use here to generate custom short links for things, so that if you know your ticket's ID, which is plastered in a few places and auto-generated by Coda, you can provide a Go link that's just Go, escalation / that number, and quickly be taken to the ticket. And we use that to communicate with tickets.
Cool.
It does, since we don't pick a scheme for those numbers, we just let Coda do it. They are a little lengthy sometimes, but that was an easier process because we know Coda can handle that generation for us.
And you're that's the link for the row, right? The URL that shows up?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a good learning for everybody. Every row, like when you click into it, if you then look up at the top of your browser, you'll see that the URL for where you are changes because of that row. So you can actually pull that in like Thomas is doing with the Go links. And then as far as the numbering, Thomas, do you use like concatenate with the row ID to create that?
That's right.
Yeah.
This was one of those areas.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, this is actually an area I had to get a little bit of help in because I know we use this exact method in other places in Coda, but it does concatenate that row ID with that Go link situation that we've set up, and creates this clickable URL. And it's truly, truly a time saver. It was someone else's idea too, which is another great reason to have other folks look at your early work, because what isn't obvious to you can be obvious to an outsider. So that was really, really helpful to me.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Andy. Fantastic. Any other things we can help with today? Any lingering questions? Also, anything Coda related is fair game. It doesn't necessarily have to be about this doc. If you're just curious about something Coda, I'd be happy to help. But yeah, so that formula tip is the formula pieces you'll want to use are concatenate and row ID. And a lot of times people would do like concatenate bug in quotes plus row ID. And that could be really helpful to get that auto numbering that you might see in something like a Jira or something like that. Cool. Looks like another question. Fantastic. Andy also wants to know, do we link the ticket to customers in our Coda CRM? Ooh, Thomas, I actually don't know if we do that with Crossdoc yet.
We don't. That's something that we could do in the future. But right now, it's just not something we had thought about yet. Totally possible. And
like Thomas said, one thing that what we're doing right now with this doc is like really refining it for the process. But what we could do is we could on our, Coda CRM, we could have a formula that pulls in, like a filtered view of the table based on the customers that are associated with it. So you could certainly do that if you wanted to. But in this case, this dev escalation doc, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong, seems much more around like that relationship between the customer champion and the dev team. But Thomas, how do you work with, like, let's say our customer success folks or our account execs? Are they part of this process in any way?
Yeah, so they can also, like customer champions, come in and submit issues and tickets so
Mhm.
that with the relationships they're working on,
Sure.
and also be able to follow up on that very easily, which is, I think, something that's really important to them is being able to come in
Yeah.
and say, okay, I need to know where my folks' tickets are in the process
Mhm.
so that I can be a better communicator while working closely with
Yeah.
them.
So even though they are technically not part of the customer support team, we have them as part of the doc. They are in intercom, so they could do the same tag of dev escalation that pops everything into this same doc and then see things that they've submitted and also do it manually. So they kind of blurs the lines of like an org chart, if you will. Awesome. Love that question. Beautiful, Andy. Thank you so much. Awesome. Any other burning questions we can help with today? Those are fantastic. I love that you're thinking about kind of the wider implications of the system, Andy, as far as like where are all the steps where this information might be valuable. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, I think questions have come to an end. If you think of something in the middle of the night, like, I should have asked Maria and Thomas that question, you can always submit it to our support channel. That's always a way that you can get in touch with us in that little question mark in the lower right-hand corner of your Coda doc. That'll be the way to get in touch with us. So again, thank you so much for your time and attention today. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next time. And Thomas, thank you so much for sharing all of your brilliant ideas. Always a pleasure to chat with you in this virtual world of ours. All right, fantastic, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.